Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Today we're going to just talk about a little problem with the homeless situation here in Miami. I want to start off by letting you know that Matthew 8:20 tells us that Jesus replied, "Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." Based on my research of homeless demographics conducted by both government agencies and faith-based organizations, I provide current, unbiased, and professional information about homelessness in Miami, Florida. Of the many difficulties of living on the streets, there are three that seem to trouble homeless people in Miami the most. Over the course of the next few minutes, I will be explaining to you the three most difficult parts of living on the streets as a homeless person in Miami, Florida. These three include the dramatic climate we experience in Miami, Florida, the high rate of theft on the street of Miami, Florida, and the hygienic problems of living on the streets and how they are amplified even more by living in our city. Miami has one of the most unusual weather patterns, as much of you know, seeing that most of you have lived here for quite some time. None of you are a stranger to the fact that Miami experiences all types of weather all year round, and that the weather here is really unpredictable. In a 24-hour course, the climate may go from an unbearable humidity accompanied with a temperature in the high 90s to a drop in the temperature to the low 60s due to a passing cold front. We also know how blue skies with no signs of rain can develop into thunderstorms all in the same evening. The most notorious aspect of Miami's weather would be its vulnerability to tropical storms and hurricanes. A hurricane, if you haven't lived in Miami long enough, usually looks like this on the Weather Channel. And if you Google hurricane, usually what you see is a picture of a hurricane next to Florida, because we are so notoriously known for getting hit by hurricanes. That's the image, if you didn't get a chance to look at it. If all that the homeless people in Miami had to worry about was snow, then they'd be able to guard themselves better against frostbite. But because there's really no preparation for a homeless person that they can provide themselves with in the event that a hurricane would strike, they're at much greater of a loss than somebody living in a northern state. Moving on, according to the Community Partnership for the Homeless, when homeless individuals on the streets of Miami were asked what the most difficult aspect of living on the street was, every person surveyed reported the high rate of theft was one of the most challenging aspects of street life. When I asked one individual personally what was the hardest part, they said, the hardest part is when you go into a local grocery store to buy a soda, and they ask you to leave your bags outside of the store while you shop. Reluctantly, you do so because you are so thirsty. But unfortunately, when you go back outside, you see that all of your belongings have been stolen. And you have to start your collection over again from scratch. This man told me this with such a feeling that you can tell that he's been through that. Theft presents such a problem to people living on the streets because each incident results in a total loss. This loss could be of somebody's identification, medication, phone numbers, bus passes, and clothing. Many times, individuals like this woman are so close to getting off the streets, only to be knocked back 10 steps because somebody stole their belongings. Also, Camilla's House reported that the lack of access to showers, sinks, and toilets available to homeless individuals living in South Florida is one of the contributing factors, one of the lead contributing factors, as a matter of fact, of the problem of living as a homeless person in Miami, Florida. Unlike a homeless person living in a cooler state, the homeless in Miami perspire much more due to the inclement climate we spoke of earlier, and they need to drink a lot more to stay hydrated. This increase in food leads to a bigger demand for restrooms, which are unavailable. With nowhere to use the toilet and nowhere to shower, many homeless in Miami are forced to sleep in their own waste or clean off in a local river, which in Miami is also illegal and an arrestable offense. as a matter of fact, in the rest of South Florida as well. Because of this, we see many homeless people, like the image of this man right here, completely filthy because they have nowhere to shower, nowhere to clean up. This presents a big problem to many of the homeless in Miami. Health problems, social problems, and economic problems. So tonight, we've learned a lot about the reality of living as a homeless person in South Florida and in Miami. And of the many difficulties of living on the streets, these three are the ones that seem to trouble our homeless the most. The three most difficult parts, once again, of being homeless in Miami would be the terrible climate we experience, the high rate of theft in Miami, and last but not least, the lack of availability of water leading to bad hygiene. I want to leave you with a closing remark. Day in and day out, we take for granted the luxuries such as a roof over our head, the materials we collect, and the health that we are given due to good hygiene. Many of us are only a few paychecks away from being homeless ourselves, and unless we open our eyes to the reality of poverty in our own backyard, we cannot begin to help ourselves or nonetheless meet the needs of others. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your time with me tonight, and I appreciate and I hope that you've learned a lot about the situation of homelessness in Miami. Have a great evening.